Hey guys, welcome to my first tutorial. Today we'll be taking a look at how I go about remodeling the assets from RuneScape so they can be imported into Unity and then used for virtual reality. So we'll be starting with something nice and simple, which will be this bar here. This should introduce you to the basics of 3D modeling quite nicely and get you familiar with some of the tools that you'll be using frequently. So when you open up a new scene in Blender, you'll have a cube, a light, and a camera. First thing we can do is delete the camera and the light by holding down Shift, selecting both, and pressing delete. From there we can then scale the cube down to 1 meter cubed instead of 2 meter cubed, as that's the size of the tiles. So to do that we'll press Tab to go into edit mode, A to select all, S to select the scale, and then 0.5 to divide it by half. We can then go into the X orthographic view, turn on snapping, zoom in a wee bit, and then just move this into position. You don't actually need to move this here, but personally I prefer it to be sitting flush with the right angle. So if we go back to RuneScape and look at the bar, we can see that the bar doesn't actually extend across the full 1 meter tile. So we can turn on our X-ray mode, select these vertices here, and then just drag them along the Y-axis. And to do that we'll press G to move, and then Y to snap it to the Y-axis. And we'll just move that in by half. 1 meter is probably also a bit too tall for the bar as well, given that we're running on the assumption that these walls are 2.3 meters tall. So what we'll do is we'll go into face select by pressing 3, grab the top face, go into the Y orthographic view, zoom in again, and just bring that down 20 centimeters to make it a bit more rectangular. We then need to inset the face that's on the front of the bar here. So to do that, we'll select the front face, press I to inset. Again, I'm going to jump into the Y view here so I could see how much I'm insetting it by. And I want to just inset it by about another 10 centimeters there. So to get a clearer view, we can turn on the wireframe mode, zoom in a wee bit, and we can see that it's still a bit too large there. And we'll just scale on the Z axis a bit as well. There we go. Now in order to get this in, all we need to do is press spacebar and then E for extrude. Jump up into the top down view, and I'm just going to move this back another 10 centimeters there. Now in order to create these planks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the face that we've already inset and extruded, and then I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate that face. I'm just going to essentially copy and paste in a new version of that face that's disconnected from the rest of the model so we can move it freely. I'm then going to scale it on the Z axis to bring it down a bit, scale it on the X axis to bring it in a bit, and in order to do this I'm just pressing S and then either X or S and Z, and I'll let you scale it on that axis. And from here we want to duplicate it again, move it up on the Z axis by pressing Z, duplicate again by Shift D, and then press Z on the Z axis to move down. Obviously these are a bit too perfect in comparison to the ones that we have in RuneScape. So if we press 1 to jump into vertice select, or just click up here, then go in the box select mode, and we can start moving vertices. So we'll move this along the X axis a bit, move this along the X axis, bring this one in as well, maybe bring this one down on the Z, bring this one up and in, as with this one, and here I'll just grab that edge and bring the edge in, and move that up a bit too. There we go. So we could just leave these as flat planes, but I'm going to give them a bit of depth just to make them a bit more visually appealing. So we'll just select those faces again, press spacebar and E, and we can extrude them outwards a bit. So I'm going to turn off snapping for this. You could turn off snapping by pressing Shift and Tab as well instead of having to go click, and just drag them out a wee bit. So the next section that we're going to do is these planks going across the top of the bar. In order to do that, jump back into Blender, press Ctrl R to select the loop cut tool, and use the middle mouse wheel to choose how many cuts you would like to do. In this case we only need to do 2, and we'll just right click to keep them in place. Then press 3 to go into face select mode, or click it up here. Select these 3 faces here, and click and hold the extrude one, and go for extrude individual. And we're just going to extrude them up on the Z axis there. What that's going to do is it's going to allow us to scale these in using their faces as the individual origins instead of scaling them in all together as the one object, like so. So if we scale them along the y-axis, we get these nice grooves in between the planks to give it a bit of depth. So the main thing we're missing now is just this ledge going across the back of the bar. It's just a rectangle, so easy enough. All we need to do is, once you're in edit mode on the bar that we already have, make sure you're in face select mode, and then select the back face. We're going to use Shift D to duplicate that again, and right click to keep it in its place. Go into the Y orthographic view, and then scale it down on the Z axis there. What I then want to do is turn on the snapping mode, turn on absolute grid snapping, and go in vertices select. Just going to select these vertices here, move them onto that bit there, and snap them onto that grid there as well. Then I'm going to select the face, scale it on the Z by 0.5 to make it about 5 centimeters, and just move it up on the Z axis to about there, maybe a bit higher actually. There we go. We'll then press space and E for extrude, and we'll extrude this out the wee bit more. Turn on snapping, and just 30 centimeters I should do. It's maybe even a wee bit far. Yeah, just 20 centimeters. There we go. So next up we have the bar pumps themselves. Again, made out of basic geometry, so it shouldn't be too difficult. Jump over to what we already have, select one of these faces here, and again Shift D to duplicate. We'll turn off our absolute grid snapping now, because that's just going to end up putting things in the wrong place. And we want to just scale it in on the Z axis there. Now I'm going to move this away for a split second. I'll turn on absolute grid snapping again, just so that I can tidy this up nicely in a mean 10 centimeter square. Go back onto face select and move it back into its position. Turn on X-ray mode so I can see what I'm doing. There we go. So give it some height by extruding upwards with spacebar E. Gonna bring it up a wee bit there. Then on this cube we'll need 2 loop cuts here, so Control R and then middle mouse wheel to scroll up to 2, and do the same again on this direction. Then grab these faces and extrude them up on the Z axis. Press 2 to go into edge select, turn off X-ray mode, and we want to connect these edges. So in order to do this, click one of the edges, hold down Shift, click the other edge and press F, and it'll link the two together. Then I'm going to go around the edges, do the same as well. So just edge, edge, F, edge, edge, F, edge, edge, F, edge, edge, F. If you happen to click an incorrect edge and join them together, just Control Z to undo. There we go. So this bit then needs to come up to about here, and then it starts to get a bit wider. So then just start scaling it outwards once we've extruded it up. And press S and 0 to scale it all the way in. It's maybe a bit tall. What we'll do is we'll move these loops up here. Make sure you have X-ray mode selected, or else it's only going to move up the ones that you're looking at. There we have it. Maybe down a wee bit now. Oh crap. There we go. So next we just need these cylinders on the bar taps. So in order to add them, make sure we're still in edit mode, jump into the Y orthographic view, and then add a cylinder. Change the vertices down to 8 and reduce the size. Change it to a triangle fan so it's not producing n-gons, and get that to align with my view. Since I'm in the Y orthographic, it means I won't need to rotate it. We'll then turn off we'll make sure that the absolute grid snapping is turned off, and just move this into place. We can use the period or the full stop, the decimal point on the right hand side, just to zoom in to whatever you're looking at, and look it on the x-axis to move it along the Y. There we go. And now we're just going to scale it down because it's a bit big. There we go. And then going to scale on the y-axis a bit as well, so it's not as thick. Excellent. So next up, we're going to select this ring of faces. To do that, make sure you're on face select, click on one of them, hold down Control, click across to the opposite side, and that'll just pick the shortest path. From there, we can then press I to inset, and then E to extrude, or spacebar E to select extrude, and bring that in a bit, give it a bit of depth. So from there, all we need now is our tap itself. Come down to here. I'm going to jump in Y, orthographic view, press Control R for a loop cut, and I'm going to turn on snapping again and bring that down till I can make it a bit more of a cube shape. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, nice. So back onto face select mode, select this face here, and we just want it to be extruding it out along the y-axis. We'll need to jump into the X orthographic view so it can see what we're so that we're moving along the grid nicely. There we go. And again, if it bothers you that it's not on the grid, just turn on absolute grid snapping and you can fix that. Next up, we're going to use the shear tool, and we're going to shear this way by -1, and then we're going to extrude down on the z-axis, and then scale z0, and that's going to give us this nice right angle here for the bar tap. And we'll just move that up on the z-axis a bit. There we have it. So before we start duplicating things, it's probably a good idea now to start checking double checking the scale of everything. From what I could tell, it looks as if these bar taps are just a little bit small in comparison to the rest of the bar, so we're going to be scaling them up a bit. So we'll select what we can see, press Ctrl L to select the rest, and just S to scale it up a bit. Jump into the X orthographic view and move it back along the y-axis a bit so it sits flush. up on the Z axis. Press 1 to go into vertex mode, box select these, and GY to move them along the Y axis. Make sure that when you're selecting things you have the X-ray mode turned on. If I press 2 and then Alt select these, I can then press hold down Shift and click here, and hold Shift and select these. Then move all of these up all at once by pressing GZ. And I'll just move this up a little bit as well. So just selected one of the vertices, Control L there to select linked and move them up on the Z axis. And that looks a bit better. So now to duplicate it, go into the Z axis, see where it's sitting three squares in. Select linked, Shift D to duplicate, turn on the snapping and GX to move along the X axis. And there it is. So if it's looking a bit strange, it's because a lot of the stuff in RuneScape is actually shaded smooth. So if you just click the object, right click it when you're in object mode instead of edit mode, and then shade smooth. You can also see that we have a couple of weird looking faces here. The reason for that is those faces are actually backwards. So when we're selecting the faces to get joined up together, Blender wasn't quite sure what direction those faces were supposed to point. So if we come over here onto your viewport overlays, you can turn on face orientation and it'll show you in red all the ones that are pointing the wrong direction. So tab into edit mode, go into face select and simply select those faces. With those faces selected, hold down shift to make sure that you can select them all. Press Alt N and flip normals, and that'll turn them the other way around so that they're the correct way. But since we've linked this model up correctly anyway, we can just select it all, press Alt N and press recalculate outside, and it'll fix it for us automatically. We'll just turn that off again. So that's one section of the bar. What about the other four? Well, easy enough. All we need to do, come over onto the modifier tab by pressing the wrench, add an array modifier, and put that on -1 so it goes the other direction, and change that to 5. Now we have our bar going all the way along. We'll turn on merge so that it links these faces together. And we'll apply that. Tab back into edit mode, I'll go to vertex select, and as you can see we don't actually have bar pumps all the way along it. So select some of those, press Ctrl L to select the rest of them, and delete vertices. And now we have a bar that more closely resembles the one in old school RuneScape, albeit without any materials or textures. But we'll get to that in another video. So thanks for watching today, and yeah, that's pretty much it.